I kind of grew up in the industry, listening to the playback of a Studer A80 half-inch playing back through a Neve console, through big JBL bi-radial monitors. And it just sounded awesome. And you always want to try to get back to that. Don't necessarily compare your music to, the latest, greatest, pop record that's squashed down to an MP3. You want it to be dynamic.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Vance Powell, Glenn Rosenstein, Michael Wagner, Ray Kennedy, Buddy Miller, John McBride, and Alan Parsons. What do all these rock stars have in common other than that they should be on this podcast? They all have something great to say about MikTek microphones. Check out MikTek Audio at miktekaudio.com/artists. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Alan Douches, a Grammy award-winning music mastering engineer who has been in the professional audio engineering business for 30 years. He's worked on over 12,000 albums with various artists in almost every musical genre. He owns and operates a state-of-the-art mastering studio and 24-track analog digital recording and mixing facility, West Side Music. Is that right? It's two Wests? It's West Side? I love it.
Yeah, that story's too long. But yeah, you pick a name for your studio, just sometimes you're not thinking properly, and then it sticks, and you start getting credits, and you go, I better keep this for a while. So
that's a good one. It's better than my band name, which was Enormous Richard, but that's a whole nother topic we can go to another time. All right, so I'll keep rolling here. Alan has sat in on many professional panels at music festivals, has been hired to speak at various colleges like William Patterson and Johns Hopkins University. His passion for making audio sound its very best is at the core of everything he does. Some of Alan's extensive credits include Sufjan Stevens, Converge, Animal Collective, The Dillinger Escape Plan, Brand New, Anais Mitchell, Frightened Rabbit, Grandmaster Flash. I'm going to say that again, Grandmaster Flash, Saves the Day, and Mastodon, just to name a few. So clearly a wide scope of music. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of how to prepare your mixes for mastering. So Alan's going to give us a lot of great advice on that so that you can end up with your best record ever. Alan has tons of experience in recording, mixing, and mastering. He's going to be sharing some great tips with us today. Rockstars, I want to thank Jesse Cannon, actually another guest on the show, for introducing me to Alan Douches. So awesome to have you here. Please welcome Alan Douches to Recording Studio Rockstars. Alan, are you ready to rock?
Yeah, let's rumble.
I love it, man. Let's rumble. We're going all like Greaser versus Jock now or something. That's great.
Turn it up.
All right, man. So tell us, how did you start out in recording? What was the beginning of this stuff?
Well, for the most part, like most of us, I suppose, you're a musician in a band, and you're the person that's doing all the technical stuff, and then you kind of get tired of lugging around all the gear, so you go, I'm gonna buy some recording gear, and so that's what I did. I traded in a PA system and got an 8-track half-inch recorder and just started recording myself. And then, people start hearing what you did, and then they're like, hey, man, would you record us? And you go, really? And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then suddenly, you have to quit your day gig to go and do that, which was pretty early. I was thinking about 19 years old when that happened. So, and then...
and where were you at that point?
That was just middle of New Jersey, Scotch Plains, exactly. Just like, between, my parents' basement and an apartment, and then nice. One of the bands that I was working with went to a 24-track, and they took me along, Great. And from there it was just kind of like they offered me a job as an assistant, and, you start climbing that ladder. So
the band themselves opened a studio, or they just took you along to be their engineer in this new studio?
Yeah, they do. I had recorded their demos on the 8-track, and then they had kind of put aside some money from all their gigging to go to a real 24-track studio, and they said, hey, we want you to come along and produce. And I was like, well, I don't know really how to do that in a real studio, but I'll come along, and so, you go along and suddenly, you feel that you're the liaison between the band and the engineer. So you kind of are producing, So, and I just got the bug, and the studio manager was there, and she said, we're looking for good assistants. If you're into just hanging out once in a while and learning what we do, we'd love to have you aboard. And that's the way it starts.
I don't know if you know Roger Moutno, but he's been on the show, and he told a similar story about starting out sort of in the parents' garage in New Jersey and then moving on to the studio. So there you go. You guys are a movement.
There was a movement in Middlesex Corridor, we used to call it. Like a lot of the early emo stuff, post-punk stuff came out of there, and there were a few of us that were always involved in most of those. So it was a great time. Yeah.
Right on. Well, so I like to ask our guests to start out with an inspirational quote. Have you got anything you'd like to share with us about making music, get us excited about it?
I guess, my most repeated statement or quote is pick a format and get to work. I get that a lot from people. They're like, oh, what's the best mic pre? What's the best converters? Or, hey, have you heard about this thing? And it's just like, we all know it's about the music. It's about the energy and the emotion of that. I mean, granted, you want to use all the best gear possible, but too many people just get wrapped up into trying to find that perfect combination of gear when we all know there is no perfect combination of gear. It's really about the magic that happens. Find the gear that inspires you and hopefully inspires the performance from the musicians, but doesn't really matter. I've got lots of stories of, tremendous records that were recorded on the absolute most basic of gear,
Yeah, well, you say we all know, and the truth is, I think we know now, but I do think early on I didn't necessarily know. I mean, to begin with, I didn't know anything. So I just thought if I had a 4-track and it would record and play back, I was like, hell yeah, this rocks, And then later, once I went to school and started paying attention, well, then I thought maybe there's some stuff that's, the right way to do it. And I started messing up everything I was doing until later on I began to really understand that, it was about the process and the performance and everything. Yeah, you kind of have to go through that full circle sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes you learn, and you realize that, that's part of the process.
Yeah. Well, so again, I'm going to say this one more time. Grandmaster Flash, rock and roll. I shouldn't say rock and roll. I should say something else, but I should probably say it with a mega delay on my voice too. Tell us the story about that. Is there a cool story about working with him?
Yeah, I guess early in my recording career, I did a lot of R&B stuff. I actually was working out of Sugar Hill Studios in Englewood, New Jersey, as well as a staff engineer there. And you really learn how to make records groove and what technology is about. The first time Flash came into the studio, I had no idea, and kind of a lot of people didn't know how you made those early, rap records, and he needed a table, he needed a whole setup. But probably the most interesting story about that was I was also just prior to working with Flash, I had worked with Aerosmith on one of their not so great records. I think it became part of Done with Mirrors, maybe, I think it was. And they were at the bottom of their career. They had bottomed out. They were in rehab and just trying to climb back. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even, Joe Perry wasn't even in the band. It was Rick Dufay and Jimmy Crespo, I think. Wow. Brad Whitford was in and out of the band at the time. But we just finished doing some recordings there with Jack Douglas, and the tapes were around, but nobody really cared that they were there. And Flash turned to me and said, you got to hook me up with those guys. And I'm like, with who? And he's like, Aerosmith. And I'm like, for what? and he's just like, man, I cut to their grooves all the time. And, that's probably the single stupidest move I ever made in the recording studio. So
you're basically, what you're insinuating is that you could have out Rick Rubin by a few steps, by a few moments there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I since after that, I had worked with Daryl, DMC, on a solo record of his, and I told him that story, and he was just like, they thought that they were, Rick Rubin was crazy too, so it made me feel better at least. But yeah, but the lesson there is, always, keep your mind open to everything and closed to nothing. You have to try stuff, and that was an early learning experience. I was probably 20 years old at the time or something.
Wow.
Learned early. And then, 6 months later, 8 months later, watching MTV, and out they pop out of that, big drum or whatever it was. And the wall was coming down. And it was just like, literally, it was just like, wow, what a lesson. Like, you just you have to be open to trying things,
Well, what's fascinating too is, let's look at those two artists. At the time you were in the studio, Aerosmith been through the studio. They've already like had a whole career in the studio, and the way to record their music perfectly matches what you would anticipate from a studio. And at that time, what you described with Grandmaster Flash is he's showing up, and it's almost like you're recording this exotic world music, and you're like, well, how do we mic this instrument? But like it was a field recording exercise to try and figure out how to interface the studio with hip hop at that time, because nobody knew, it was brand new.
Right. It was. It was so new that, like, I actually sat him down and I just said, listen, I said, we're going to be together for like 2 months here in the studio. Give me the background on this, just teach me, because I just don't really understand this. And he did. And he, told me about the beginnings of how he would, cut records and find records. And he was really the first person to like scratch records. And, he would always, mark all the labels off of his records so nobody knew what the records were,
Wow. Yeah. Right.
Like, don't tell anybody what that snare trigger drum is. It's like, no, he was the same way. Wouldn't let people know what his records were, but that's how he made his living.
Yeah. Fascinating. Can we mention the name of the album, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes?
I think it was called Back to the Old School.
Back to the Old School. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it was,
Rockstars. We'll include like some simple, maybe a YouTube clip right in the show notes that you can just click right through and check it out. Well, again, it's like my sort of closing thought takeaway on that is you really were taking something that, you're looking back on this and you're saying, oh man, why did I not see this connection? But the opportunity to take something that was very much a part of the studio and think outside the box to connect it to something that was very brand new to the studio. So, there's bound to be an analogy for all of us in our worlds if we just think about it like that.
Well, it did. It definitely kind of formulated where I went because, working with major label artists like that, I also at the same time was working with indie artists. And, I kind of made a decision. I'm like, well, you know what? I really blew it with Flash. I mean, not that I could have done what, Rick Rubin had done. They had the whole thing laid out. But, I really just decided that, indie music was the place to get in on the stuff, get in early with bands. And as it turned out, I just had a lot more fun working with indie artists than on major label albums. There were quite a few of them at the time. Like I had hooked up with a couple of producers, Jack Douglas and Russ Heidelman, some other, huge producers that, were bringing in these projects. We had a great studio. It had a Neve console and an old Neve 8038 and a big old wooden room to track in. So it was a great place to learn, and they were bringing in these awesome artists, but a lot of them, weren't doing exciting new things. Then you'd have, some of David Bowie's band would come in and just be jamming, and you go, this is new. What is this? And they're, oh yeah, it's a band we're putting together. It's kind of, it's like, yeah, this is exciting, so fun stuff.
Well, I totally empathize with that. So I remember feeling the same thing. I started out interning in a studio that was bringing in some very successful artists, and I learned a ton from them, but it just didn't resonate with me musically until I started hearing an indie record that was being mixed there. And in fact, it was being mixed by Roger Mutno, also from New Jersey. It was Jill Sobiel's record. And then I found the guys who had that studio, and I was like, oh, I can relate to this. It's new and it's different, and it feels like my kind of music,
Right. Yeah.
I even got invited to, I won't mention names, but to interview to be an engineer of a very famous guitar player. And I just my gut was telling me, like, I just wanted to do something that somebody hadn't done yet,
Right.
Something different and new. So I think that's a thing that we all feel. So I'm really glad that we get to talk about indie records. Let's talk about Sufjan Stevens, about that record, because I think the one that you did is the same one that I first heard about, which was his record of all 50 states, which is such a cool concept.
Yeah. He was. I had done the first state, which was Michigan, which was a great record, and then he embarked into Illinois. And as he was recording it, he called me and was just like, this one's a lot more ambitious than the other one. I'd really like to bounce some ideas off of you. And I have a couple of mixes, but I want to bounce my multi-track, which was all a Digi-01. Actually, it was recorded. The basic tracks were in a Roland standalone 16-bit 16-track recorder. But then he imported it all into a Pro Tools Digi-01, and he wanted to get more warmth. He was feeling like he was missing the warmth, and so he wanted to bounce the multi-track to a 2-inch machine that I had. And I kind of said, well, before we do that, why don't we just try and hit tape during mastering, And he was like, all right, let's try that. So we did an experiment. We did 5 songs first, came in, and we hit tape, and he was just, yeah, that's it. He said, okay, good. I can go back and finish mixing now, knowing that the mixes will sound great, post tape from the mastering session. And
nice. That's pretty thorough of him as an artist to go right to the end, check that the completed thing's going to work, and then go back to the work table, and keep cranking out songs.
Well, the irony about it, though, was that most of the record didn't hit tape in the end result. We found, although it was doing what he wanted, when the final mixes, when we put the final album together, we kind of felt that the tape, although it was doing that glue thing and giving it some more harmonic thickness, that the arrangements within his that album were pretty dense anyway. And we found that the clarity without the tape was actually what he wanted, or was more desirable. So although we had went through that first step of hitting tape, eventually the final record, I think there's only 2 songs. There's a bunch of songs on there. I think 18, 19 tracks or something like that. I think only 2 of them wound up hitting tape. So,
well, it's interesting. When you were actually bouncing it off tape, you had to invest a whole lot more into trying out that sound than you do now if you used a digital plug-in tape emulator, for example.
Right, right.
And so you might have been much more reticent about going with the non-tape version after you had just put in all that effort of trying it out on tape. But now I try to, if I'm using a tape emulator plug-in at any stage, I try to just turn it on, turn it off, and just judge it with my ear and go with whichever one hits me, And and because you never know. Sometimes the tape version is the one that you like, and sometimes it's better before you mess with it on tape.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me to take their mixes to tape, and if I do, I don't necessarily tell them that I'm doing it right away. I always kind of give full disclosure at a later point. But, if they know that a version, maybe a revision or something is hitting tape, they're just automatically going to want to like it, when in fact, maybe it's doing what it did with Sufjan's record, which was just making it too thick, and the arrangements, the details were getting lost in there. That sounds awesome on a rock record or something where there's, space for a drum sound to develop or something, but wasn't really working in that context.
Well, so that I wanted to ask you a question, which is to share an important failure story from your experience or from the studio. Maybe that's kind of a version of it, is where tape doesn't always work. But have you got anything that you'd like to share as a story about kind of a failure turned learning experience for you?
Yeah, well, I think you go through a lot of them. Even the Grandmaster Flash thing is a failure, in a sense. I think the whole Volume Wars thing was a big learning lesson for a lot of us too. Early on, it was exciting to make, records really loud. But, in hindsight, there's a way to make it loud, and we push.
Early on, there was still 20 dB of headroom to work with, right?
Yeah, it is funny. You go back and we're reissuing some records now from Joan of Arc and Cap and Jazz and some early emo stuff. And you go back and you think of those records and you think, yeah, they were pretty loud at the time. But oh my gosh, yeah, they're like, 6 dB lower now, than where we're shooting for things now. I think you have to learn from your mistakes. That's all part of it. You have to be willing to accept that there are going to be mistakes, and then you have to choose whether or not, they're going to be part of your arsenal, putting them out.
Isn't there also, I don't know if it gets talked about in the Loudness War description, We talk about things just wanting to be louder and louder, but also the devices on which we actually listen to music were changing through that time too.
Yeah.
And different things maybe demanded a different kind of input signal from whatever your source was to sound its best. And then things got louder, and then the next device tried to accommodate that as its reference, maybe, and then so you're now trying to master and mix for that next device.
Yeah.
But maybe we get to talk about that here in a second. But it's just fascinating to me the way that whole progression went from early CDs, maybe really kind of sounding crappy, to, things being 20 decibels louder.
Yeah, it's really remarkable because, there are some, CDs can sound awesome, in terms of thinking of 16 bits and a 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate. You can store wonderful information there. It's really more about how do you get it there that is the determining factor.
Interesting. All right. Well, so what about an aha moment of success for you? Something where you kind of things clicked in the studio and you sort of saw the light?
I think one of them was when I left the Neve console and I went to a MCI 636, which is notoriously terrible sounding.
Was that the Sony with automation and all that?
It was pre-Sony. It was the first kind of like inline automated console. But the thing about it, that was the aha part about it, was automation. On the Neve 8038 we had originally had NECAM 1, which was the early Neve moving fader automation, and it was just atrocious. We tore the faders out of the console. You had to put all the analog faders back in. I mean, the moving faders were analog, but the software was so cumbersome that you weren't mixing. You were trying to debug this software from 1982 or 3 or whenever it was. So when I got to the 636, it was just like, oh, this is awesome, and you think back how primitive that just fader and mute automation was, but yet how insightful it was to making records sound great. And I think so many, it's really interesting. During mastering, sometimes, people will bring in their entire hard drives and they'll have the entire session there and they'll say, oh, no, just open up the whole session. If you want to change something, go and change it, and so you open it up and and you look at it and there's no faders moving. They've got like, a multiband compressor and a limiter on every channel, and the faders don't move, but they've got this perfect balance set up. And I think the aha moment is faders are supposed to move. There was an assistant I once had, we were working on something, and I tried to explain to him, like, well, just, ride that in there. Just try it. Have some fun. Don't just leave it there. It's, that's what it's about, is making things dynamic, making them move. Even in mastering, I change things on the fly. Sure. Yeah. Let's just, okay, I'm going to do it at 2K there, and it's going to switch up to 3.3 there. Okay. Let's see if we can make that happen. There's one of the EQs, that has a sweep variable on it. Okay, let's go for it. Let's try it. Sure.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about when and how that process of moving faders comes into the equation, because it can be, I think when you're mixing on consoles and stuff, you just naturally start grabbing faders and moving them with your hands and stuff, especially if it's live. If it's a live mix, it's your only option. As soon as it's no longer live, then all of a sudden we start removing ourselves from doing anything somehow. We're like afraid to, maybe I shouldn't change it. Maybe I should change it, What do you think the way to approach that is in this digital world? I mean, again, most of us have a mouse. We're like trying to click with a mouse and move one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think the tactile, work surfaces are going to start coming out more and more now. I think TC has a white paper about it too, that like when you're following your mouse across a screen, that's a rapid eye movement. And if small muscular motions with your right hand interrupts the flow of neurons to your ears or something. So
I love it.
Yeah, they have a huge paper about it. That's why on this TC6000, they made that moving fader box was really more so that it didn't tear into that concept. It was like, no, you can move these faders like normal faders, and you don't have to watch a mouse tracking across a screen. The numbers just move when the faders move,
Yeah.
And I think that's true. When I first got the TC6000, I didn't get it with the fader pack, although the demo they loaned me did have it, and I just didn't like it as much. I found myself not going to it, like, nah, it's a digital box, But then once they gave me that tactile interface, it was like, oh, this unit actually sounds pretty good. Software hadn't changed.
Yeah.
The converter, the interfaces hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed was your way that you were entering the information, and you weren't thinking about a mouse or touching a screen or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just a much more user-friendly interface, and that's key.
Let's throw some analogies at it. So, as a musician, you do play an instrument, Alan?
Yeah, mostly guitar. Yeah.
Okay, so guitar. When you learn the guitar, at first you look at the fretboard and you're trying to look at where your fingers go and stuff like that. And with practice, and as people get better and better, you look less and less until eventually you notice a great musician doesn't look at their instrument. They might be playing with their eyes closed and just like really feeling it and emoting it. And it makes sense. Tactile is like, why do we have nerves in our hands and fingers and body to tell our brain what's going on, so that we know what's going on without having to look at it? So it makes sense that this whole process of having to look at the screen while we're doing stuff that's tactile would be an interruption. It's like, it's not what you're designed to do. So I think that's cool to hear about that.
Yeah. And early on, when Pro Tools and Cubase and all these early programs were coming out, it was pretty common for people to turn the monitors off in the control room when you were just listening, like turn that thing off, let's just listen, but now there's so much information that you can adjust and you can look at, and you can, graphs and, meters and things that I don't think people are turning the monitors off anymore, but maybe they should, go back to that old school way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, so let's see, there was Massey had a plug-in, Stephen Massey. I don't know if it's existing now, but it used to be one where you could put it on, I think, the master bus, and it would just turn the screen black when you were in play, if you wanted.
Awesome.
This is a hip idea. And then we sort of thought through one here at the studio. So what we did is we realized that you could take, like a black image or something like that, or just take your studio logo and blow that up on your screen in full screen mode. And then on a Mac anyway, I think you can kind of Apple tab your way to flip from your DAW to that. So you could be on playback, you could kind of just flip to a full screen image while you listen. So that's sort of maybe a quick key hack to doing that.
Yeah, I think we've gotten way too dependent on looking rather than listening,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I have a second screen hooked up now. So now I've got like two screens hooked up.
Right. And that creates this whole new baffle problem for you in between your speakers. Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, so great intro to the show here. Let's jump into our topic of the show, Alan.
Sure.
How to prepare your mixes for mastering.
Yeah.
What would you like to say about that, or how would you like to introduce this topic?
Well, it's a little bit of a what are you pretending not to know topic. Do you think your mixes should be overcompressed or should they be dynamic? A question I always get is, how much two-bus processing is too much? Right. How much, should I pull my compressor off? I use a little bit of ozone. I use a little bit of this, what should I do? The clinical answer is, do one with it and do one without it, but chances are, whatever you had on that, whatever you're using on that two bus that's creating, the emotion for you to mix and do the blending is pretty critical to what you're doing. But the problem is that you're now committing to that and there's no turning back. And maybe your monitoring environment isn't proper. Maybe you want to go to vinyl. If you're going to print a vinyl, I can't cut to vinyl if it's squashed. It's just not going to come back sounding great. You've got to leave headroom. You've got to let it be dynamic. So, you always want to temper that stuff and think about it. It's like, well, what do you think? Of course, try to take your limiters off. Keep it as high as resolution as you can. I'm still amazed at some people that are recording at 44.1, and that they're, not going up to 88 or 96. Higher than that might be overkill. But, try it. Do a test. Try some things at higher sample rates. See if you hear the difference.
Let me throw some questions at you. So, for example, a common rate for us to record here is just 2448. It's something I adopted a long time ago, and I've just kind of stuck to it. What's your take on the difference between 44.1 and 48? Do you feel like it's there? You notice it mastering? It's probably a better bet to be at 48 because it's a video standard. So anybody recording at 44 is kind of
placating themselves into the CD world, which is dead. Mm-hmm. So why not go to 48 at least? You know, can we hear the difference? Well, we can measure it. So we must be able, some people must be able to hear it. So yeah, sure. 48 is better.
What about the idea, again, like I'm going to ask a totally geeky question, which is probably just dumb to even ask it if it's technical, but if you go to 48, it moves that Nyquist filter up a little bit higher, sure, right? Yeah, which gets it out of the way a little more.
Absolutely. If you have material that's there, you know, it's surprising well, you know, if you're using good mic pre's, you know, good microphones and you have that air there, that's awesome. Most of the time it's getting squashed in the processing. So you don't really have too much of it.
Yeah. I'm only recording with cardboard tubes, so I don't think I have anything above 450 hertz, you know?
Yeah. You know, I mean, 48 makes sense. I would say without a doubt, 48 should be the minimum. Don't go to 44.
Okay, cool. Now 96, you are hearing a difference, or you're hearing sessions come in at 96 and they have a clarity?
Yeah, you know, is it the producer or the engineer that's making the difference, or is it the sample rate? You know, I just think that there's a correlation there that, you know, the better producers, you know, the better mixers are working at higher sample rates, you know.
Okay. What are some of the complaints that people have about working at 96? What are the challenges we're going to run into, you think?
It's CPU power. You know, a lot of guys, you know, don't have, or they'll have multiple systems. I know a particular producer, you know, that he does a lot of work at home. You know, he's got, you know, a full rig at the studio, but he likes to do some editing and stuff at home. But that system at home can't handle 96K. So he made a switch once he started working at home. He's like, you know, I'm going to just go down to 48. You know, it's probably fine. He lists, you know, doing a project. That sounds fine. You know, we're limiting ourselves for the future here too. You know, as higher bandwidth starts to matter, as you know, we start looking at where music is going. You know, all your original content's going to be at 48. You know, or 44.
Now, what about Sufjan's records, which I think are famously recorded at who cares resolution? And I mean that respectfully. Will they continue to sound great as we move forward? And how does that work?
Well, that's the key. You know, it's not the sample rate; it's how you use it. You know, he wasn't clobbering the levels. As a matter of fact, almost, you know, all the tracks, you know, were probably below. I'm saying the individual tracks because we were testing going to 2-inch tape. The individual levels were like peaked at -6, -5 in that range. You know, so he wasn't trying to squeeze the digital domain. You know, when even at 16 bits you have 96 dB of dynamic range, you're still, you know, 15 to 20 dB above any amazing analog machine. Mm-hmm. So you've got the dynamic range there. Why are we squeezing it? We were taught that, you know, from the original DAT machines that we were using, that, you know, oh no, get in there as hot as you can, but don't clip it, you know, gosh darn, you know. So I think we were sold a fallacy there that, like, well, yeah, for 2-track, you want to put it in as hot as you can. So you do get the dynamic range, the better signal to noise, you know, but from a multi-track world, especially if you're mixing in the box, leave headroom. You got to have headroom, you know.
Well, so let's jump to this next question, which was how do we create the ideal dynamics in a mix? So here we are. We've got whatever sample rate we're doing. We're mixing. We're trying to make stuff sound the best this record's going to sound. You know, we've liked it all along while we're tracking, but we're always just instinctively trying to make it one better, you know?
Right. Yeah, sure.
One louder. And we're pushing it. And then we're going, well, maybe it can be louder, you know? So what are some tips you have for people to trust their gut, but at the same time, not back their record into a digital corner somehow?
Well, this is, you know, I don't know that this isn't going to come across right until you realize what I'm saying, maybe, that I think turning up the monitor volume in the control room. I think, you know, a lot of people are using, you know, smaller, you know, bookshelf kind of speakers, and, you know, and they're playing it, you know, at moderate volumes, and compression like that, you know, kind of sounds good. But when you turn it up, it should really, you know, it should have fantastic dynamic range. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you start to lose it. You start to lose that punch of the kick. When it's playing quietly, you don't mind. You're just kind of listening for, you know, the balances of everything. But when you turn it up, it should feel like live music, you know. Yeah. So maybe, and probably the fact that a lot of people don't have large monitors in their control rooms is part of that, you know. So you're trying to get the excitement through the compression or the limiting or something, rather than just letting there be air and letting, the kick and the snare punch and snap through.
Okay. So I like that. So a couple of thoughts. One is, when you're mixing Rockstars, you definitely want to work all day at low volumes just so that you actually your ears can work all day, if you're going to spend some time on your mix. Two is that, you hear about this from folks like Chris Lord-Alge, for example, or other people, making the comment, well, at loud volumes, everything sounds good. So it's more challenging to make things sound exciting at low volumes. So, but I think that refers to manipulating the individual tracks before we get into this stereo bus treatment. At that point, maybe don't even have your bus compression on yet, no limiting, no bus compression, and try and make your mix sound exciting at low volume. So it's like you're treating the individual elements. But then when you get towards the end and you're like, all right, now we're sort of dealing with the stereo bus and making sure that we've excited this whole thing together, then Alan, I think what you're saying at that point, that's when you have to allow yourself to crank the speakers and turn it up. So you make sure that it's still got the energy coming through. Because if you squash it too much, it's going to end up just kind of
a pancake,
or searing your head off or something and being harsh.
Exactly. Those low frequencies should punch through you and envelop the room with tone. That's why I said it kind of sounds a little wrong at first, but, music is meant to be enjoyed at loud volumes too, and so, does it sound great at loud? Does it sound great quiet? And that's the balance. You want it to be both, and when I'm working, I have two main volumes, in my control room, and there's really nothing in between. It's a loud volume and a moderate volume. I
think it's loud and mo louder.
We can go back to Grandmaster Flash on that one. But you got to check it at those louder volumes because you want it to feel great when it's pumping.
Yeah. Well, so and another thought, Rockstars, is if you're mixing and you're trying to make your mixes great, but you're sending it to a mastering engineer, professional like Alan, then he's going to be better at getting it from this loud to the loudest it could be, and appropriately so. So if you are careful not to overcook it on your end, then you're at least leaving you, Alan, the room to bring it up to the best it's going to be without screwing it up.
It does feel like, the mastering engineers get to have all the fun, but the reality is that it's a multi-formatted future, and there are places like, Apple's, mastered for iTunes format, a bit of the YouTube compression and vinyl that, you just don't want it squashed. It's not going to sound as great that way, when it's being played back to back on something. And also I think, the success of some records is often that which has dynamics. I know that there were studies done for TV stations. I think Turner Broadcasting Network did a pretty famous study where they recognized that if they kept their volume of their broadcasts within a consistent dynamic range, and considering the commercials and everything as well, that people stayed listening to that or stayed tuned to the station longer, rather than one program being louder, one being just quieter. But if there was dynamic in there, people felt it was natural and they actually left the channel on. And I think that's very true of music, that when music has dynamics, people listen longer.
I think so. I think when something sounds way too excited and too loud, it might catch my attention for a moment, but I'm usually like, I can't last very long. And then it's short attention span theater after that,
Well, that's radio. That's pop radio. And that's, when people ask us to master, a single for radio in the older days, that's what you wanted. You wanted to take some extra low end out, don't make it too wide. You want it, as soon as it pops on, you want to grab somebody's attention. But that's what pop radio was about, but that's kind of a different era. Now you want people, it's about catalog. It's about, sustainability. How long are people going to be listening to your music on Spotify? Hopefully long enough that you actually get a residual payment someday. So it's got to sound good. And the key to that is dynamics.
So now, do you have any advice for our rock stars who are mixing and they want it to sound good on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud?
Well, first off, don't clip it. That's just going to make a mess of it. And, there's companders that they're using in their software algorithms that are going to bring it up to an average volume, so there's no reason to have to limit it to death to try to compete with some of those other records. There's a bulk, there's an RMS value that you can shoot for to try to make your mix dense and so then sound loud. But it's not about the top end clipping. It's not about that last, 2 or 3 dB of dynamic. It's about that stuff that resides, from -12 to -20 dB of peak level. That's where you want that to be dense, and let that other. Yeah, it is. It's, and that's slower attack times, if not no compression, letting things be transient. That's what you want.
You sound like a personal trainer. It's about core strength. You need core strength.
It's, back in the, the older days, my God, in a 24 track analog studio, maybe you were lucky to have 8 compressors, in the studio. And so when you're mixing down a 24 track, you had to kind of, I'm going to have a stereo bus compression. Maybe I'll do 1 parallel. Now you got 4 compressors. Where are you going to put them? Well, lead vocal, lead guitar, snare drum, and then you have to start writing those faders. And why is it that we always go back to saying how great those records sound? Because they weren't squashed. They hit tape. They had that, they had some thickness in that, bulk area, but they weren't limited. They weren't multi-band compressed,
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like new films and old films. I mean, you watch a new movie and huge screen with ultra sharp and wide array of colors and special effects and everything. Yet, if you go back and watch a really beautiful old black and white film, there's a suspension of disbelief for a moment while you accept that it doesn't sound like this new flashy thing. But once you get pulled in, you really, it can move you and the story comes through and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's similar with old records,
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's something I really love about these new streaming formats is that you can have access to so much material and you go back and you just kind of let yourself live in a certain genre and sound, and it's kind of a wonderful experience. And if it's not too harsh and too loud, you can stay there longer.
I know that for a fact. I can see it with the records that have, stood up over time that I've worked on. They're dynamic, and they may be extremely loud as well, but they have dynamics within their arrangements. It's just not all compressed and multi-banded.
All right. Well, so let's talk about bit depth. 16, 24, 32. Those are my options in my DAW. What should I use?
Well, I guess, 32 float is fantastic. You've got all, especially if you're not going to be squeezing the level, you've got so much headroom that you're not going to clip the internal mixing bus. That's awesome. That's a beautiful thing. At least 24. No one should be recording at 16 bits. That just doesn't make any sense anymore. I mean, saving space on your hard drive these days, it made sense years ago because you had to, be able to record enough tracks. 24 sounds great. When you think about what we get with a 2496 file that we may send to, Vinyl Cut or to get MFITs manufactured from or something, there's plenty of dynamics. Again, pick a format you can get to work. I don't think you should be so concerned about 24 or 32 being better. But if it's a problem for your CPU to be handling that task, then 24 is fine.
So 32 is better than 24, but 24 is still fantastic. That's sort of the idea.
Yeah, I think that even some of the software manufacturers may, design more towards one or the other because the 32 is really more about dynamic rather than authenticity. There's more calculation going on, within a 32-bit system. But again, so far, both of them so much better. I mean, 24 bits gives you 144 dB of dynamic range. Nobody can capture that. No converters on this planet really can capture that kind of dynamic range. Yeah. So, take advantage of it. Take advantage of what you can.
So is it about that? Is it about the capturing part of where you get the value and the bit depth? Or does the bit depth also affect how your DAW is able to run it through plugins and mix it all together and all that?
Yeah, the 32 sounds better with mega processing. I think 24 would probably sound better with just if you're just trying to capture something and then maybe play it back through an analog source for analog summing or something like that. I would probably say, less mechanics involved. Yeah.
Fascinating. So if we are going to do a mix and we're really going to layer busing and plugins and side chains and parallels and all that kind of stuff, we might appreciate what 32-bit depth does for our mix.
Right. And, it's cliche to say it, but try something both ways. See if you can hear the difference. See if you feel the difference. It's hard to get the similar source, because you can't just record a band once, 24-bit, and then say, okay, guys, do it again at 32. Obviously, their performance is gonna make a difference, you know. But try it with an acoustic guitar with somebody. Just and then try processing it. That's the other thing about the 96 versus 48 thing. Is like, for the most part, 48 again can sound really good, but it's as you start processing and you start laying on the DSP, does the 48 hold up to what the 96 does?
Interesting. I was thinking of how, does your computer hold up at 96, or does it choke after 2 plugins and tell you to upgrade to just break out your credit card for $5,000 or whatever?
Well, again, pick a format and get to work. Sufjan's record was 16-bit 44.1, and 24 tracks, mind you, and it sold
and 50 states though, right?
And actually, that was only the second state. He had the success of that record made him really go back. He was just like, how am I going to do this 48 more times? He probably will at some point. He's pretty prolific.
That's great.
Yeah.
24, 48, 50. That was his format. 16, 44, 150. All right. Well, so now here we are. We've just done our 32-bit mix. What do we deliver to you, the mastering engineer? What do you want from me?
Don't change the sample rate. Don't change the bit depth. Keep it exactly as it is, and try to not overdo your 2-bus processing. And as always, I know every mastering engineer will say, listen, if you're questioning how much you got there, send it over. Let's hear it. Let me just. That's kind of what I do in the morning. Is I'll have a cup of coffee and I'm getting the tubes are all warming up and stuff, and I'm checking some emails and stuff, and I'm listening to mixes that people are working on. And, I'll shoot them back a quick. Listen, I heard that, that sounds a little squashed, especially on the low end. Maybe back that down a little, So,
nice. So, well, that was going to be my next question. So we'll get to that in one sec. But am I sending you a stereo interleaved file or split mono?
I like stereo interleaved right now just because there's less to go wrong.
Right. There's less things to get lost in the shuffle. Yeah.
I've just seen too many mistakes with interleaved files, with the dual mono files, are they actually, do they match a stereo, or are they 2 mono files? I've just seen the craziest of times, different lengths on them,
Okay. So Rockstars, when you're mixing, select stereo interleaved, bounce it at the same format that your resolution of your session is. So if you're at 2448, bounce it at 2448. If you're at 3296, big breath, Lidge, bounce it at 3296. And then if you want to bounce yourself an MP3 for listening back, I still do that. I don't know whether I'm a loser, but in my Dropbox, I'm driving in the car and I want to listen to the mix we just did. I select the MP3 one to play back, over the internet and over Bluetooth to my car stereo. I just feel like that represents where I'm headed somehow.
It's the real world. I mean, that we do the same thing. We'll deliver full waves for everybody, but we'll also deliver, even during the process of mastering, we'll send people MP3s because it is at the moment, the way that the world is hearing them. We try to tell them, please check the wave as well, because, we want it to sound great in the future. But MP3s have to, and they can, as long as you use, we do 320 kilobit MP3s and they sound pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we're going to go to what you were just talking about, which is how do you communicate with your mastering engineer? How important is that? What process should our listeners hope for in their experience sending their records, their mixes to their mastering person? It's been said quite a few times, communication. Feel free to email and talk. I like getting on the phone, discuss what you're going for, let us know, what experiences you've had. If you've got, a limiter on your bus, let's hear it. Let's hear what you're getting used to. The more communication, the better it is. I mean, it's such a competitive marketplace. If you're choosing to get somebody else involved at the final step, let them know what your feelings have been all along the way. What are you shooting for? What are your ideals? I often ask the question, what records inspire you, rather than saying what do you want your record to sound like? That would be kind of stupid because it's, you want it to be original and awesome on its own. But what records inspire you? And then when people say things, that are, incredibly dynamic, you go, okay, I get the idea where this is going, Yeah.
So you just have to, you have to communicate. Just sending it off is like sending it to that Lander plugin or something. It's like, what are you going to expect back from that? And people do that all the time. They'll come to a mastering session. You should try to go to a mastering session if you can. They'll come to the mastering session. They'll say, no, just do your thing. We want you to do your thing. And I'm like, well, what I do is work with people. So let's talk about it. What are you looking for? What inspires you? What makes you go, yeah, I want to hear this again? That's what we want to get out of your music. And I think like that Sufjan story, I mean, we did 2 sessions prior to even starting the mastering session. There was another where we discussed how he was monitoring and whether or not a bounce to dysfunction was actually interfering with his listening. He felt that when he was listening on headphones during live, it had one sound. Then when he was bouncing it to disc and making a CD and then listening back in the same control room, it was sounding different. And it was just like, yeah, because you're listening through a headphone amplifying jack or listening to your CD jack. There's lots of variables in there.
Well, so here's something that is fascinating to me. If you get something back from mastering, a finished master, one of the places that it lives these days is you're watching a YouTube clip of something and it's playing over your iPhone speaker. What should we expect from our iPhone speaker as far as the sound of a finished master? Should we expect that you should be able to turn the volume all the way up on this and it sounds clean? Should we expect it to distort? Should we expect it? I know we're not going to expect any low end, but what's reasonable to hope for?
I mean, I think you should be able to turn it up to your, 2/3 point, maybe a little more before, you start saying, that's just pushing the limit of what that little speaker is going to be able to do. Okay. And always compare it to the other things that you're feeling your genre is part of. If you feel like, oh yeah, I'm going against these louder bands, then obviously that's what you're going to have to compare it to. And the little amp and everything in the iPhone or your Galaxy or whatever, it's just going to start to buckle at some point. It's just not going to handle that. The speaker, now, the box.
Does it mean that some records are maybe being mastered to sound loud out of an iPhone speaker, but they sort of destroy the record a little bit in order to make that happen? Does low end get removed, for example?
We'll do versions for separate, playback devices. We will do, obviously vinyl. It's like if I try to cut this in vinyl as this pancake, it's just not going to sound good. It's just going to get scratchier the deeper you try to cut that. Yeah. But if you leave the dynamic, it's going to become that lively motion that a lacquer becomes, or that ultimately the vinyl pressing becomes. Same thing with the iPhone speaker. If it's going to be over squashed, you're going to get a lot of hash. That amp is just going to start frying in there. I think more dynamics are going to sound better all across the board unless you're getting into that competitive market, in which case, again, there's that body that you want to shoot for. You don't want to shoot for that top 2 or 3 dB being the loudest. You want that stuff that resides underneath it to be thick and full sounding.
Now, what about if you're doing something with a little more dynamic, typically like a jazz album? Do you feel like if you turned your iPhone speaker all the way up, you might still hear some crunching, a little bit of fuzzy distortion clipping in there?
The guys that I work with that have that, they have DACs hooked up, digital to audio converters hooked up to their phones or their iPads, and they've got this whole setup, so they're not even bothering with that. So I don't even concern myself with that with them. When we're talking about it.
Cool.
So,
I got an oddball question, but it's
at
the same time.
It is the real world. I can't tell you probably 3 out of 5 people, as they're checking their masters, their first check is on a device like that, because that's the first thing they want to hear. They're going to download it onto their phone. They're going to play it on their phone.
Or it got delivered that way, and all they had to do was click a link in an email, and it starts playing off the phone speaker, and then they go.
Right.
And we're used to hearing some things that way, and we want our record to pop up and be equally as exciting.
Yeah.
Or not somehow like throw us out of the groove going like, whoa, what was that?
But, if somebody is particularly putting up a link to shop their record or something, we'll roll a little extra low end off. nice. Just because we know that the speaker systems that the people are going to be monitoring that on, A&R guys or, product managers, managers, they're not going to be listening on headphones, at home or, on their big speakers. They're listening to it on their phone. Yeah. They're, or maybe earbuds, and you don't want that low end crapping out. You want to give it a nice, clean bottom end. So
interesting. So Rockstar is another little tidbit studio hack that I like to do is I use something called Nicecast to actually cast over Wi-Fi a 320 MP3 or AAC file, I guess. I think it's 320 sure. MP3 of the mix while I'm working, and I'll pull that up on an iPhone and listen to it on the speaker just to see what's happening, see if it's screwing it up or if I'm missing something.
You just have to remember as you're mixing and you're sending out that Nicecast signal or any one of these, streaming device, software devices that, allow the remote mixing to happen. You got to remember that the people on the other end, check with them. What are they listening to? Are they listening on earbuds on their phone?
Right.
Or do they have this patched into a set of speakers? Because they're going to be making comments back to you about that based upon their listening environment.
Yeah. Well, in my case, I would just be referencing it myself just to sort of see what it's doing.
Right. Okay.
But that is kind of a fun way to, not exactly real time, but close to real time, hear what's going on through the internet in different places on different systems.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump to another question that comes up in mastering. What do we need to know about the stuff that we don't hear? In other words, tell us about metadata. What are those weirdo codes that we're supposed to have in there so that what are we going to not make money with our song?
Yeah, ISRCs. The interesting thing is that, especially from an MP3 standpoint, everybody can download a free MP3 tag editor. You should be putting as much information in the notes section as I would put your entire lyrics in the notes section. Because if anybody's searching the internet and wants to find, hey, I want to find a song about Marilyn Monroe. Whatever, it's her birthday coming up. I don't want to, radio station wants to play something and they do a search. If it's not in your metadata, how are they going to find it? If it's, if it's not the title of your song, how are they going to find it? Load that metadata up with everything you can so that it's searchable. The band name, the artist, maybe the writers, lyrics, a story along with it. You'd be surprised what the search engines will find, and then you show up for that.
So when and where do we do that? Is that something we do before we deliver to you for mastering, or does that happen later?
Well, we try to get that information ahead of time. It's part of our our scheduling form is, do you have ISRCs? Give us proper CD text, information, proper capitalization and punctuation, all that kind of stuff. Because you don't want to be, sending this off for pressing and then finding out that when you get the pressing back that, we didn't want any capitals on it or something,
right.
So by all means, get that information ahead of time. It's kind of almost a little bit, part of the mastering process is making everybody start, thinking seriously about their product. And it's like, oh yeah, song titles. Is that the title? I don't know. We're still thinking. All right, well, just let us know when you've got that figured out,
All right, so some of that data, if that data went to you, some of it is going to show up on a CD and some of it is going to show up on an MP3 for online streaming?
Right. We'll embed ISRCs onto, all WAV files, and we'll put as much metadata into the MP3s as is reasonable. I mean, it's really not a big deal for us to put all that information in, but you can change it yourself anyway from an MP3 standpoint. You'd have a hard time finding the software, I think, to be able to embed your ISRCs.
Right. But I probably should have started with this. I should have led with this, but what in the world is an ISRC?
International Standard Recording Code. It was a number that was invented years ago that was used quite widely in Europe for tracking radio play. The United States never really adopted it, so it kind of sat by the sidelines. But now, obviously, it's like a fingerprint. It's a part of the process of tracking your song's playability, its purchasing, all of that online stuff. You have to have an ISRC. Your digital distributor will put one on there for you if you don't have them. Then they'll probably charge you for them. So, and
it lives in a WAV file and it lives in an MP3, or just in one of the two?
You can put it, yes, in both. You can you can put it anywhere you want it within the metadata for your MP3s as well. There's a spot for it, but there's only one place for it in a WAV file. I don't know in particular, I guess maybe the Sonar software that we use automatically embeds them into it. I'm not really sure. Right. I think they make a I think they make a standalone ISRC editor for WAV files. Probably as mixing engineers, you might want to start thinking about embedding those in. We can see them too as they pop up for us if you're sending them embedded into the WAV files. But we normally try to get that information on a metadata sheet ahead of time. And
so, not to put you on the spot, but where do we go to get an ISRC code to deliver them to you before?
Oh wow! Is it ISRC.org? USISRC.org in the United States? There's a different organization that for different territories. So you'll have to check within your territory for it. I would just Google ISRC numbers, and find out.
As I recall, because again, I don't do this regularly, have to deal with ISRC codes, but I think you do just go to their website and then you enter in song titles and it spits out a code which you can use. And I don't remember if it costs money or not.
Does.
It does cost money. Well, there you go. Now we know it costs money.
And quite frankly, you can use your digital distributor to assign those. There's no real benefit. It's not like you make more money by having your own codes. If you're an artist, get serious about it. Sign up to have a registrant code. Yeah.
If you are using CD Baby, for example, they probably have that built into the process of uploading stuff to them.
Yeah, and then they can provide that for you. Because I think it's for an album might be about $150 between getting the registrant code and then the numbers you're going to need. It might be about $150 or something like that. So whereas maybe it would only be $30 or $40 for CD Baby. And if it's your first release, it doesn't matter. It doesn't give anybody else really any rights to your music. It's just a number so you can track your sales and your playability.
Cool. All right. So Rockstars, just a reminder, get your ISRC codes before you deliver your mixes to mastering. If you're just the mix engineer, that's really going to be the producer and the artist's responsibility anyway, but they are going to ask you what they need. So now you know more than you might have before. And make sure that you've got as much metadata together, or that you're letting the producer and artist know that they should collect all this metadata and deliver that to the mastering engineer as well. And all that detailed stuff, there's room for it inside MP3s. In fact, you can add it yourself just using iTunes and other formats like that later if you want. But in this case, I think you do it.
I think it's a good idea. Like when, the band is bugging you during the mix, just, hand them a sheet of paper, said where's all this information, and this way they'll leave you alone as they start scrambling to try to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, so Alan, last question, and then we'll take a break and come in for the jam session. But what have I not known to ask you about mastering yet? What have we not covered that we still need to know about?
Yeah, good question, I guess. Well, I guess the thing I try to tell people is that, if you're working in a workstation, just, the headroom is paramount. It just, please leave yourself headroom. Even if you're going to put a 2-bus compressor on or something, try to record and not record in at full, scale digital. Try to leave 5, 6, 10 dB on your peaks. You'd be surprised. It does, the signal to noise ratio is not going to get worse. There's way more noise involved in that. And when that mix or that product gets to mastering, it's just going to be more malleable. We're going to be able to work it more. We're going to really be able to do what you're going to pay us for.
Yeah, the signal to awesomeness ratio goes up. Is that what you're saying?
It does. I think there's a lot of insecurity along the way of using a lot of processing, on tracks just to get things to sit and to get it right. When in fact, moving some faders, riding that my God, the amount of automation that is possible in the workstations is just unbelievable compared to what great records were made with. But I would say just, it's probably something that mastering engineers say all the time, just leave dynamics, not because we want to squash them, but we need it to be able to work our tools.
All right. So here is the last question that I would like to ask. So I think the first thing we wonder about is, and I remember this distinctly, which is like, man, I sure wish I could hear a mix before mastering and after mastering, because learning how to mix, you're sort of trying to get it to this place and you have this feeling that mastering makes everything sound better. So then what you want to know as a mixer is like, well, when have I made the mix sound good enough that that's where it's supposed to be, and allow mastering to make it sound the rest of the way better?
Yeah, I think there used to be a great process for this, and it was called being an assistant engineer. And you were a fly on the wall, and you were witnessing other engineers do mixing in your control room that you were aware of, and you got used to what that dynamic was supposed to sound like. But these days, I don't that's not really an option for a lot of people. So how do you do that? It's the communication with your mastering engineer. Again, send them a file, let them hear it. Very often I'll get a file. I may not sit down and spend an hour working on it, but I'll throw it through the chain. I'll, in the morning, I'll pop it through and maybe send you back an MP3 or something like that. Absolutely. It's in my best interest to make your record sound as great as possible as well. I don't want to just get done with it as quickly as possible. It's about, the whole team being successful. So, if you're unsure, send your mastering engineer a file. Send them two. Say, I just did it yesterday with somebody. He has, something that he's just got, all excited about on his tube bus, and he sent it to me. And you know what? It actually sounded better. I was like, good, that's great. Keep it on. Keep mixing, because that's not hurting.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a sense initially that the things you appreciate in a finished record might come from mastering, and you're not sure how to make them come from you in the mixing process. And I have had mastering engineers tell me in the past, just make it sound the way you want it to sound, which is really what you're saying. And then deliver that to mastering, Don't try and not go for what you're trying to go for.
Yeah, you have to have all that emotional energy there. But I think the problem is we're so used to hearing a compressed format, just as, our population, just as, as we walk around, everything is hyper compressed, that's what we're very used to. And that's why I say, I kind of grew up in the industry, listening to the playback of a Studer A80 half-inch playing back through a Neve console, through big JBL bi-radial monitors. And it just, it sounded awesome. And you always want to try to get back to that. Don't necessarily compare your music to, the latest, greatest, pop record that's squashed down to an MP3. I mean, ultimately, it's got to compete at that level, and hopefully that's your mastering engineer's, prerogative to get it to there. But you want it to be dynamic. And the interesting part of it is going back to a lot of reissues that a lot of mastering engineers are doing. We're getting asked to pull stuff that we did, 8, 10, 12, 14 years ago, and now get them ready for mastered for iTunes or vinyl again. Yeah. And if we had, fortunately, we have higher resolution backups and not just the squashed versions. And it's so reassuring to hear back and go, wow, this is great. It sounds awesome. Again, so the key is talking to your mastering engineer, getting in communication with them, and also having a relationship with them. When you find somebody that's doing a great job for you, get in their face about it. Say, hey, listen, here's what I'm going for on this record. Help me. What can I do? Get that feedback.
Cool, man. Well, Alan, this is awesome to have you on the show. We're going to take a break now and come back in a moment for the jam session. Rockstars, before we go, I want to remind you that we will include the links to all the stuff we're talking about in the show notes, which you can find at recordingstudiorockstars.com. Search Alan Douches, and it'll take you right there. That's Douches. Or if you're just on your iPhone, your listening device, your mobile, just click through right there, and you should see the show notes right in the podcast app you're using. And it's a clickable link. You can just hit it with your finger. It'll take you right there. We'll see you guys in just a sec for the jam session. Hey, Rockstars, I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, MicTech Audio, right here in Nashville, Tennessee. MicTech is a maker of awesome microphones and recording equipment. Whether you're looking for a simple plug-and-play USB mic or a high-end condenser tube mic, MicTech has you covered. MicTech is the only mic I've used for this podcast, Recording Studio Rockstars, and nearly 100 episodes. You're hearing my voice right now on the MicTech Procast SST. Thanks to you, Rockstars, for listening, and to MicTech Audio for the sound of over 350,000 downloads. Check them out at mictechaudio.com. Cheers. Hey, Rockstars, we're about to jump into the jam session again. And Alan, are you ready to jam?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, cool, man. Hey, you know what? Before we go, we were just discussing this during the break there. Rockstars, Alan has been kind enough to provide that metadata checklist that we were talking about, that you can, when you're mixing a record, you can make sure you collect all this information, and whether you embed it in yourself or whether it goes to the mastering engineer, this will be a great resource for you. So we'll include a link to that. You can download that for free at rsrockstars.com/metadata, METADATA. So I'll put that link in the show notes. You can just click on that and get that right now. So we'll jump in here. So, and thank you for doing that, Alan. When you started out in recording, what was holding you back, man?
Interesting thing is location, I think, to consider. If you're going to put together a commercial entity, you've got to be easy to get to. You've got to have access. You've got to have, stores around you, things like that. Our first location where we were, we kind of thought it was kind of cool. We were in the boondocks, and we found out a lot of people didn't like coming to us there, although we loved being there. Maybe it's changed now. People love doing that kind of escape thing. I think that that was a holdback.
What's the first, second, and third rule in real estate? Location.
Yeah, right. I mean, it matters. I mean, you can do all this stuff online and et cetera, but you look at a lot of the best records. People are all communicating together. If you're a young and up and coming engineer, probably best to get to a metropolitan city. One of the major ones.
Nice, cool, and especially since sometimes the advice is to go to where the musicians are and start meeting people that way. If your studio and your place for recording and mastering is close to everybody, it's going to be easier to start out networking.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So now how about some of the best advice you received?
Trust your feelings. Trust your feelings, because ultimately you're going to need to repeat your feelings and become successful. If you become successful by trusting your feelings, you'll sustain that success. But if you're guessing or copying what you're doing, you're just going to have to constantly be looking for inspiration from elsewhere rather than just trusting what you feel is best for the project.
Okay, cool. Is that similar to sort of trusting your gut? Same thing where like if something seems wrong to you, you just need to trust it?
What are you pretending not to know? Exactly. I mean, again, you may make mistakes. You've got to learn from those mistakes. But I think, I've witnessed, working with producers and record labels and A&R guys, they have to trust their feelings. If you're guessing and copying, you're not going to be able to replicate it when you really need to. Learn how to trust those feelings. Be smart about it. Make the mistakes. Say, okay, you know what? That vocal level was too low. All right, you know what? I got to check it on mono on an Oratone or whatever, or check it in whatever source that you use. I have to do that check. If I don't do this, I'm going to be sorry about it.
Yeah. Great advice. All right. So now how about a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use today on their next session?
I'd say, I just said it, checking things in mono. I think a lot of people are surprised when, if it's a phone, a portable device, or, an iPad or a tower or something, that when they hear their music in mono, they're like, what happened to those guitar parts or something? I think that, if a lot of the older consoles used to have mono switches on them. I don't know if is there a plugin that gives you a mono choice?
I think there are, and I won't name it off the top of my head, but we can find some. There definitely are.
Check the mix in mono. You'd be surprised how many sources. If you're listening to a stream somewhere, it's probably being streamed in a mono way.
So now, why would mono affect levels of things versus stereo?
Things on the side go down 3 dB. They become quieter. Even though it's summed to mono, things that are hard panned will be lower in that mono mix, and things in the center will come up.
Why do they get lower?
It's an electronic. It's just a summing. It's the function of, when you have something in both the left and the right speaker, it's doubled. It's 3 dB louder. Kick drum and snare drum. It's in both the left and the right. So you're doubling the power of it. So it's 3 dB up. So whereas your guitars that are hard panned, perhaps, which sound awesome and wide and all that kind of stuff, and when you're listening in headphones, it's great. But then you click that mono source, and your guitars disappear.
I don't think I knew that for decades. Like I did, but I didn't. I think that I just kept beating myself up about making a judgment call in the studio and then going out to the car or going to some other environment, and the vocal was too low or something wasn't right. And I was like, how come I keep mixing the vocal wrong, Yeah. And it was, I think it was that. It was just not understanding that I needed to have that mono reference while I was mixing in the studio.
Yeah. A lot of mixing guys, do maybe even their final tweaks of volumes in a mono speaker, and that's another thing. It's like mono with 2 speakers is a little deceiving. And sometimes if you can switch to mono and turn 1 speaker off, that's really effective. It's fascinating.
So I know. Yeah. I've also heard that mono and 2 speakers, it can be valuable because it gives you a mono effect if the two speakers are literally stacked on top of one another, but it doesn't sort of phase cancel the reverbs.
Right.
But anyway, we're getting esoteric now. All right. So now how about a hardware tool that you want to talk about? Something that is always great to have on a session. Could be a recording thing, could be something totally different. I'm
going to name a couple of things here. Dear to me, I have a couple of pieces. The TC6000 Mark II, just, an amazing hardware box to use. In the analog world, the Pendulum 6386, which I believe is now called an ES8, the Vari-Mu compressor that they have. If you get to a show, try that thing out. It's an unbelievable compressor. I'm not just throwing props his way, but Greg Gualtieri at Pendulum Audio made an amazing compressor there. It's just the attack time, release times are so variable, very usable presets, great stuff. Clocking, make sure your system is clocked properly, please. If you have multiple interfaces, make sure that they're properly clocked, and maybe even the same source. Don't put your overhead on one of them and the overhead on the other one. Try to keep stereo pairs on your same interface.
Yeah, good tip right there.
And a great piece of gear is, I don't know if you've heard of this, but the Tascam DA3000, the SACD recorder, the DSD recorder, we have two of them, and we send one out on loan. If somebody is summing an analog or mixing on an analog board, it's great to get a piece of 1/2-inch tape coming back to your way with the mix, but 1/2-inch tape is expensive. 1/4-inch tape is expensive. Mm-hmm. Tascam DA30, we just found one the other day. I think it was new in the box for about $800. This thing just sounds unbelievable. It's a one rack space piece mixed down. It does, multiple PCM data streams. I think it goes up to 192. But the beauty of it really is the DSD layers. Mm-hmm. It can record at 2.8 or 5.6 megahertz, and it captures all of that analog glory that you're summing in the analog domain on. It's a great box.
Interesting.
Yes. People will ask me, they'll buy a used 1/4-inch machine or something. They'll think oh, maybe that's the best way. Unless you're going to get a great machine and you're really, planning on spending money on tape, check out the Tascam DA30. And I think Korg makes one too. We haven't heard that one, but we love it. It's just it's an awesome box.
Wait, now you said the Tascam DA30 and it's sitting right behind me.
That's I'm sorry, DA3000. Yeah, DA3000. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool,
I'm sorry.
Cool.
Yeah, numbers. Right. How many numbers do we go around batting around in our head every day?
My Tascam DA30 is the old ancient DAT machine. It's my first piece of gear. It's still sitting in the rack. It doesn't work anymore.
Then they have the fort. Yeah.
Well, that's a great tip. All right, so. And I think that what you're talking about is using that DA3000 to capture the mix rather than routing the mix back into your DAW to record it on a pair of tracks or something.
Exactly. And also if you're mixing in the box and you're not summing analog, don't take it out of your DAW to go to a DA3000, or to, and for that matter, also people think that sometimes with tape too, they're thinking I'll just come out of my DAW and, I've got this, I won't mention a brand, but mediocre 1/4-inch machine. I'm going to deliver it that way. It's if we can hit tape here. Maybe it's better that we hit our machine during the mastering process rather than you recording it to that mediocre machine. Unless, of course, there's a certain level of compression, a biasing trick you want to try, something you want to do specifically to create your sound.
Yeah.
And again, that all goes back to talking to your mastering engineer.
Yeah, good tip.
Yeah,
all right, now how about a software tool, something you want to talk about, something exciting?
I'm not really up on a lot of software tools. The tools that we use most, we have, things, but most of our digital processing is either the Weiss hardware pieces, the TC6000. But I got to say, there's some great restoration software out there. We just got the Isotope restoration bundle.
Is that the RX?
Yeah. It's pretty sweet. You got to spend some time. Yeah, you got to spend some time to figure it out. I think I may have been the only person on the planet that knew how to use DigiDesign's Dinner or the Binner plugin, which I've used on countless restoration projects over the course of 2 decades probably. Sonic Solutions, they had their no noise. We had that too, and a lot of that stuff is just not user friendly at all. The Isotope restoration bundle is really usable, and the dehumming filter. Don't send. It's worth it just to buy the dehum filter. You know, if you had a 60 cycle hum in your track or something. Awesome. That's great stuff.
I use Isotope RX. I'll be using the dialogue denoiser plugin for this podcast. It's a great tool.
Cool. Great.
All right. So now how about a resource for the business side of this? You haven't been doing this for a hobby your whole life. Do you have some online resource, or do you have some advice you want to share about being smart with business?
Great staff. Make it easy on yourself, get some great assistance. I think something that's a great resource online is the All Music Guide. I don't know if everybody's checked that out. It's a pretty ubiquitous site that a lot of people have, but, checking out who's working on your records and stuff. It's a great resource to find that information out, when records were recorded, what engineer was on them,
What are the challenges of hiring staff or finding an assistant? Let's say somebody doesn't have anybody that's assisting them yet, and they want to start looking for an assistant to help them with their mixing from their studio, for example.
I think you have to really set the boundaries right away. Like there was someone, I think George Massenberg said it at a conference once, and somebody asked him if he takes on assistants. He said, "Yeah, but when you're there on the first day, don't ask if you can mix the song. Tell them, listen, you're not going to be touching the gear for 2 months or something. This is what I need you to do. I need you to work on cleaning this place up. Clean the dishes. Wash the dishes." And then as they do that job, you have to reward them. You have to say, "Thanks, man. Hey, listen, let me show you what I'm doing on this trick." I found that that's always helpful. When you see somebody doing something useful to your facility, go and pat them on the back and then show them something, show them a trick.
Yeah. Let them also know how each of those mundane tasks adds up to the whole, which is creating and delivering a great record. Hopefully,
it is. Having an environment that people like to be in is essential. You've got to feel comfortable. Artists want to feel like they're in a creative space.
All right. So now, how about an organizational resource? Do you use anything cool online that helps you keep all your shit together?
We use Google Docs. I think that's an amazing, once you kind of get used to using that and you can share those documents. We have a couple of engineers here, and we'll share scheduling information that way, even though we have an iCal calendar and thing like that. It's just a lot. You can put a lot of notes on the Google Docs, talk about things, about what we're doing, hey, I've got the half-inch machine aligned for this. Can you make sure, if you're going to use it, let me know so I can come back and at least the alignment will be the same. All
right, so let me geek out a little more with you. So you wrote that note just now. That's a memo. That's your all inner office memo, right?
Right.
How does everybody else actually see that note?
We're just used to looking for it. We're just, we have one big notepad in a sense that we're just used to looking. We used to do it in Mac Mail. We would just have a note page, and just if you're coming in, just check the notes. Look to see what's going on.
It's the equivalent of leaving a notepad, a legal pad on the console that the next person comes in and sees. Everybody knows that they should pop up Google Docs and just look at the top.
Exactly. There. Because I may be on my way home at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and Jamal, one of the other engineers, is coming in at 11 to work on a project, and I forgot to leave him that note. Well, he knows when he comes in, he's going to check the Google Doc.
Okay, cool. That's a great tip. I like that.
Yeah.
It's like high tech and really basic, just like, person to person at the same time.
Right. And because sometimes we don't know if somebody's coming in, or, because we do work around the clock. So it's just easier to just leave information, about things like, hey, check this, that tube was a little funky on me. I got a little bit of sporadic noise. Check all your fades, make sure they're all clean.
Yeah. So Rockstars, I just made this up, but this could be a way to maybe do that too. Because you could have, when you start, you could leave the doc up on the screen of the computer, or you could even make it so that it automatically opens your browser and the homepage is that docket.
That's a good idea.
Maybe so that when somebody starts up the computer, it's the first thing they see. Sometimes I use the yellow, the Post-it sticky notes on my screen of the computer. I'll use those a lot for notes to people.
Yeah.
Or, mine says turn off Dropbox before tracking.
Well, that's the thing. It's like our main CPUs don't have a lot of other programs on them. They're just set up to run and be doing what they do. So, we're not going to have, you really got to go into production and look on the Google Docs page.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Yeah. And I think, in my world and probably a lot of our listeners' world, that computer's doing everything you can think of, you know?
Yep.
But it's probably a dedicated studio computer, but it probably is still browsing the internet and, you know, watching training videos and everything else.
Yeah.
So let's go. Last two questions. They're hypothetical, but this one is: imagine yourself starting over and you needed a simple setup to record. You needed to find people to record music with, and then you needed to make ends meet. What would be your suggestions for those three things?
They might all coincide in a similar place, or two places maybe. Record stores. We're just now doing some live recording at a local record shop, but I mean, it's a pretty big shop. They got about 6,000 square feet. They're one of the largest vinyl shops on the Hudson River. And, you know, just hanging out there, and you meet musicians, you get to talk to people. You're definitely going to find somebody that's going to know somebody. They allow you to leave all your business cards, you know, and information. And the same thing with music stores. You know, go into your music store, your local music store, let them know what you do. You know, leave your business cards there. You know, you've got to, nobody's going to just come and knock on your door and ask, hey, do you guys record here? You got to get out into that world. And I think record stores are a wonderful place because you're going to find people that care about music, and music stores, you know, bands that are looking to buy gear.
That's cool. That's a great tip. I like that. And let's get people back into record stores, which is awesome.
Oh, you know, it is. I mean, we just started hanging out up there with them at some point, and then they were like, they have a stage. They have a stage and a full, you know, PA system, and we're now recording shows there, and we're doing limited edition vinyl runs. You know, so we're
nice.
Yeah, we're recording it. We're mixing it down in the back in the analog, and we're cutting it to lacquers, and we're doing limited editions. So
very cool. So that sums it all up. That's the recording setup, which is probably whatever you need to capture the mics from the stage and a couple of room mics. That's the meeting the people, and that's the making the ends meet by selling it back at the store.
And that's key. You know, live recordings without room mics are awful. You know, so, you know, a lot of people have, you know, they'll take the feeds from the boards, but they'll forget to put up, you know, a stereo pair somewhere, you know. And also an interesting thing is, don't point the stereo pair at the speakers, you know, at the main stacks. Point them elsewhere. Get the audience reaction. Get the sound of the room. Yeah. You know, we'll do two pairs. We'll put one back in the room, catching the audience, and we'll put one kind of like behind the speaker stacks, pointed out into the audience.
Oh, cool. Good idea. Audience mics from up above the stage. I've seen those before too.
Yeah, they sound great.
I did some of that in the past, and I remember feeling like it was nice to put up a couple of great room mics that really got the power and the energy of the stage, knowing that I could rely on the close mics to just bring forward the detail of the voices or the guitars or the, the point on the kick and the snare, but you know, really try and make those just reinforce the room mics.
Yeah, put your best mics up as the room mics.
Yeah. All right, cool. So now, last question, hypothetical 2. We're going to take the studio Wayback Machine, and you're going to go back. I don't know if we were going to meet you before or after you forgot to tell Grandmaster Flash about Aerosmith, but you're going to go back and find young Alan and tap yourself on the shoulder, turn around. What are you doing here, older Alan? You say, well, I've come to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What would you tell yourself?
Learn how to play piano.
I like it.
Yeah. And followed immediately by learn to play every instrument a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, but so many times in the studio, you know, you don't have to be an accomplished, you know, player on any particular instrument, but, you know, so much of the modern music we make is derived from keyboards and stuff. And if you don't have an inkling as to how to play that, you know, then you better learn fast. I would say start, you know, hand exercises, just, you know, 15 minutes, 3 times a week, just practicing something, anything. And then, you know, sit down behind a drum kit, just, you know, sit down for 10 or 15 minutes. It's going to sound stupid the first time you do it, but, you know, you do it 4, 5, 6 times, suddenly you got a beat. Now, you know, maybe somebody needs, you know, just a very simple drum beat played or something. You can go out there and play it, you know, often you're waiting for musicians to do something, you know, a singer's writing words or something. You have time. You don't have to be, you know, checking your Twitter feed, checking whatever. Go to an instrument, sit down at that instrument,
You're sitting in a studio full of instruments. Go play them.
Exactly. At the first studio I worked at, we had a 7-foot Yamaha grand piano, and I started sitting down at it, saying like every day after I clean up for the session, if I just sit down and do a 10-minute, lesson on the piano, I'm going to be brilliant in 10 years. Well, I never kept it up, so I can, I could do a little bit of piano, but I wish I were more accomplished.
Yeah. So that's how we can account for your lack of piano brilliance now is.
Yes, that's it.
So the piano is also a wonderful instrument because it's an arranging tool too. And it really helps you understand what's going on in music and arrangements and instrumentation and stuff. And I would go so far as to say, learn, which piano keys correspond to the bass strings on a bass guitar and an electric guitar and what else is there? Mandolin, a fiddle. I don't know.
Absolutely. That you learn that range, and, you always have to leave room for things. It's a common thing. You watch an arranger working with a orchestra or a small group of musicians, and they're always telling them, get out of the way of the vocal. No, open that up. Move me up an inversion over there. I need room for my vocal to be sitting in this arrangement. And it's such the piano is a visual tool. It's really easy to see that. You don't really see it on a guitar. You don't see that where that vocal is really sticking in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Great advice, man. Well, Alan, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars. What an amazing bunch of stuff you've shared with us. We're really thrilled to have you on the show. Rockstars, I would like to remind you that you can get Alan's free metadata cheat sheet. Now, this is going to be something where you just download it, and it's going to be a reminder for you, which you can just keep right there in the studio for all the information you need to get about each song as you finish a mix and make sure it's there. It'll be something you can give to your producer, your artist, and help them out as you're moving on towards the mastering stage. So that's a great tool. That will be at rsrockstars.com/metadata. Metadata. And so I'll include that link right in the show notes. And again, you can find the show notes right on your phone, your listening device. Just look for it there. You should see a clickable link. You can just hit it with your finger. If you're driving, maybe pull over first before you do it. But I promise to not make you have to type. So that's my goal. And Alan, tell our listeners how they can find you, learn more about you. How can they book you for their next mastering session?
Our website, westsidemusic.com, our email, wwsm@mac.com is our abbreviation. Look for us on Facebook. We're there. I forget what those handles are. I'll probably put them on the metadata sheet. But by all means, get in touch with your mastering engineer. Be communicative with him. Let him know what you're looking for.
I would suggest that your mastering engineer needs to communicate back to you. So Rockstars, if you're not getting a response, or if you get I don't know how you want to talk about revisions, but maybe if you do a good communication beforehand, you don't need to worry about revisions so much. But just getting a response from your mastering engineer so that you don't feel like you're just sending it into an abyss and getting it back later, and what you get is what you got, and tough luck.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. You rock, man.
My pleasure.
We'll see you around the studio. Thanks for listening, Rockstars. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.